What if I told you that New York could lose tens of millions of dollars overnight? Not because of a natural disaster, not because of war, but because of who's allowed to drive trucks. Yes, this is real, and it's happening right now. The US federal government has issued a serious warning to New York State. Fix your commercial driver licensing system, or lose $73 million in federal highway funds. This isn't just a policy disagreement, it's a power struggle, and it could reshape how truck drivers are licensed across the entire country. Let's break this down. At the center of this controversy are commercial driver's licenses, or CDLs, the licenses required to operate massive trucks that transport food, fuel, construction material, and just about everything else we rely on daily. These aren't ordinary vehicles. Some of them weigh up to 80,000 pounds. One mistake behind the wheel can be deadly. That's why the federal government tightly regulates who can get a CDL, especially when it comes to non-US citizens. According to a recent federal audit, New York may have crossed the line. Federal transportation officials reviewed a sample of CDLs issued to non-citizens and claimed the results were alarming. They say more than half of the licenses reviewed failed to meet federal standards. In simple terms, auditors believe New York issued commercial licenses without properly verifying immigration or work authorization documents. Even more concerning, some licenses were issued for up to 8 years, despite the driver's legal status potentially expiring much sooner. To federal officials, this wasn't a minor oversight. They called it a serious breakdown of the system, and that's when Washington decided to apply pressure. The U.S. Department of Transportation sent a clear message. New York has 30 days to correct the issue. Or, the federal government will withhold $73 million in highway funding. That money is normally used to repair roads, maintain bridges, and improve traffic safety. So yes, this decision could impact everyday commuters, construction workers, and local economies. Now here's where the story gets tense. New York doesn't agree with the accusations. State officials insist they followed federal law and say the audit paints an unfair picture. They argue that cutting off highway funds would hurt the public far more than it would fix any alleged mistakes. So far, New York has not announced whether it will change its licensing process, challenge the findings, or take the issue to court. And that silence? It's loud. But let's zoom out for a moment, because this story isn't just about New York. This is part of a much larger federal crackdown. Over the past few years, federal authorities have raised similar concerns in other states, signaling that Washington is getting far stricter about how non-citizen commercial licenses are issued. In other words, New York may be the headline, but it's not the only target, and what happens here could set a nationwide precedent. Now let's talk about why this issue is so complicated. On one hand, the trucking industry is desperate for drivers. There's a well-documented labor shortage, and many non-citizen drivers help keep supply chains moving. On the other hand, federal officials argue that safety cannot be compromised, especially when it comes to who is legally allowed to operate heavy commercial vehicles. This puts states in a tough position. Do they make licensing more accessible to meet labor demands? Or do they enforce stricter rules, even if it slows down the industry? There's no easy answer. And then, there's the political layer. This clash highlights a deeper tension between state authority and federal power. New York believes it has the right to manage its own licensing system. Washington believes federal safety laws must be followed to the letter. No exceptions. When federal money is involved, the federal government holds the leverage. And this time, they're willing to use it. The clock is now ticking. New York has just weeks to respond, revise its system, or push back hard. If the state gives in, it could mean tighter rules, new checks, and possible disruptions for drivers and trucking companies. If it doesn't, millions of dollars in highway funding could disappear. With real consequences for infrastructure and safety projects. Either way, someone feels the impact. So, what does this story really represent? It's not just about truck licenses, it's about immigration and labor realities, public safety versus economic demand, federal enforcement versus state independence, and how far Washington is willing to go to force compliance. This is one of those stories that starts quietly, buried in policy language, and then suddenly reshapes national rules. And trust me, this isn't over. Whether New York complies, challenges the decision, or triggers a legal fight, the outcome could affect drivers, states, and licensing laws across America. So if you want to stay informed as this story develops, make sure to subscribe, because the road ahead, for New York and for the nation, just got very interesting.